Alrighty guys, so we're going to get into UI. Now UI is actually something that a lot of people struggle with in Unity, so I'm hoping this video helps a bunch. Um, UI generally always starts in one place. It starts with a canvas. So let's go to UI, right click in the hierarchy, go to UI and go to canvas. Now the canvas is a little weird. If you double click it, it's freaking ginormous. Alright? And it's supposed to be. If you're like, whoa, why is it so big? That's okay, it's supposed to be that big. Now, one big thing that you'll notice is if I go UI image and put, let's just, I don't know, let's put a, well, we'll just use the white box, that's fine. This is not a sprite, this is an image. Does it use sprites? Yes, but it doesn't have a sprite renderer like a normal character sprite does. It has a little bit of a different deal than everything else. And it renders over everything, specifically because we have render mode set to screen space overlay. We're not going to get into screen space camera or world space today, but screen space overlay it basically is a HUD or an overlay over everything, and it's attached to the screen. The reason this is so big is sometimes you need a lot of space to work with, and it represents the screen that you're working with. You'll notice if I go to free aspect, it changes and will change as I go. Now, this genuinely is why you don't do free aspect. You want 16 by 9 or 16 by 10. Now, one big thing here that we need to fix right away, if I set this to 1920 by 1080, and then I set this to 1280 by 720, and I don't know, 1024 by 576, you'll notice my UI image here gets bigger and bigger, or smaller and smaller, depending on the resolution that I'm working with, which isn't necessarily what you want. You kind of want to keep your UI constant because the player should still be able to see, everything that you've got cooking. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off for right now. It's another canvas I was using for something else. And that is all controlled by the canvas's UI scale mode. Now, I generally hit scale with screen size and then put in a common resolution for my reference resolution, which would be 1920 by 1080. And then we'll notice if I go and switch over to these other resolutions, my UI stays the same size. Now, there are times where you won't want this. You may want the UI to get smaller, but I think that would personally always feel like that's usually better left in the player's control on what percentage do they want their UI to be, how big they want their UI to be, rather than for us dictating it. So this is just my opinion. This is, however, generally very useful on mobile devices. In that case, because most mobile devices are set to portrait, you would swap these two around because you want your X to be bigger than your Y, or to be smaller than your Y. So now, how does do UI elements work? Well, or let me backtrack. Let's actually look at all the UI elements we have. We're not going to go through all of them, but we're going to go through some of them. So we have a button. Zoom in and drag my button down here. We'll make it a little bit bigger. If I right click on here, we go to UI, we have a text mesh pro. Now, this is a big deal. Once you hit text and text mesh pro, you're going to get a little pop-up that says import TMP essentials. You definitely want to do that. You don't need the examples, but you do need the essentials. Basically, Unity used to have a different text solution, and it's gotten replaced by this package that they bought from another developer. If we go to UI one more time, I think the last thing I'm gonna do is a scroll view, okay? Because that should get us into a good amount of content for us to look at. So, first things first. Text. Let's go with this because it's the simplest one. It's really just a text box. You can update your text however you want. You can change the font size. You can change the color. You can do all that good stuff. Let's make this obnoxiously green. And then let's center it. You have all the same things you would have in your Word, when you're working in a word processor. An image, like I already said, is simply an image. It takes a sprite. You can drag a sprite into it if I can manage to click correctly. There you go. It's kind of weird because look, he's got a little guy following him. It's kind of cute. Or you know, if you wanted to, you could have, if I had my lives up in the corner, right? Let's go ahead and I could have this here and say, let's make it red, and go and say 3x lives. I centered the text. I guess I, in hindsight, don't want to do that, do I? Scooch it over a bit. Oh, one thing with the text, however, is you can do offsets, right? You have two ways of scaling it. You can go ahead and scale it normal with the little blue orbs, just like how you would with an image. But you also have this, which is an offset thing. You never want this yellow box to go outside, really, of the blue box, the box with the blue circles. And if you ever need to, there's this extra settings menu where you can set these a little bit more precisely, or reset them, obviously, if you need to. There's all kinds of options here with the text. I'm not going to, this isn't a Text Mesh Pro tutorial, so I'm not going to go into too much on it, but you can change fonts, you can do all kinds of stuff. Yeah, and that's how you scale it up. Buttons also come with a text component on them. You can look at it right there. Generally, you're going to probably want to make it bigger, the font bigger. And yeah, they're clickable. So let's say if we go ahead and hit play right now, it'll be a little weird, but if I hit the... Oh, I think I messed up my character last time around. Hold on. I'm going to pause the video and fix him real quick. Yeah, we good? I think we're good. Yep, we're good. All right, so back to normal. We're all good. Basically, the button is clickable, right? I can click it. You can see that it darkens. If I go ahead and click on that button, you can see that I have all kinds of things that I can change, right? I can go, and when I click it, these transitions all have to do with when you click the button. I can change the highlighted colors, so that way when I highlight it, let's click back in here, turns a different color, you know, all that good stuff that you can do. That being said, the way that you actually make a button do anything is with this little on-click option. So, for example, let's go ahead and hit this, and I'm going to drag my player. You have to drag a game object into this little section here, and one of the things we know our player can do is they can, I believe we have this, play the jump sound effect, right? They have code on their player controller that plays the jump sound effect. And if I click this button now, we'll be able to hear the jump sound effect. Works really well. Generally, you'd have a whole UI manager and a bunch of UI services that control all your buttons and whatnot, but that's the gist of UI in Unity. You go ahead, it's not very complicated to get that working. We're not done yet. We're going to get into two more tricky bits. I think we're actually going to pause and not do the scroll view for now. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, just because I don't think we need it for what we're working on right now. More important part is this guy right here. Two parts, actually, now that I'm looking at the transform. The rect transform is a transform. If you've learned about inheritance, it inherits from the transform class. So it still has a position, it still has a rotation and a scale, but it also has this width and height. When you're working with UI, there's only one or two scenarios where you really want to mess with the scale. You'll see here, if I start scaling the button, my text starts getting distorted. It doesn't look good. What you really want to do is you want to change the width and the height. All right. Now you might be thinking, well, that button did not follow. Well, it did follow with its anchors. It's still trying to maintain its size with the button. It just did not change its font size. Now we can set it to auto size the font, so that way then we can have it go as big as it can, or as small as it can. But the real trick here is the fact that we have this thing set to stretch with its container. You can see that in the hierarchy, the text is a child of the button. The button is, you know, this big. You can look at its blue circles. And the text is set to stretch with it. So if I press Alt and Control, or Alt and Shift on my keyboard, you can see the buttons here. It says Shift to set the pivot, Alt to set the position, and set this here it will expand consistently. Now, if I were to not, this little bottom right corner says expand in every direction. This says get set to the bottom and expand left and right, middle and expand left and right, top and expand left and right. And same thing here, but it's going to expand up and down and go left, right, bottom. Now, if I were to simply go ahead and press the center and then change the size of our button, we'll notice that it doesn't expand with it. And that's okay in this case. That doesn't really change too much for us. But we'll notice that if we did want the button text to change sizes, it's not going to. We have to go and set it back to expand all the way. Now, I clicked the text. I'm going to go ahead and move my button back to the middle of the screen and shrink it back down. And let's say that we wanted the button to, well, let me take a step back. These are really great for internal objects in a container, right? It makes sense, it works. But if I were to, I don't know, make my screen 4000 by 4000, we'll see a problem with our lives up here. It doesn't actually stay in the top left corner, and that's where I would imagine we want our lives to stay. So the rest of these buttons really focus on where should things be pivoted to, where should they be set. And that, now these all do that to an extent. They stay on the middle, they stay on the bottom, but what we want to do here is actually set, for example, this image that we have for our lives to the top left corner. Now, no matter what the size of our screen is, it will always stay in the top left, no matter what we do. Okay? And that is the power of going and setting these things. Now, we can go ahead and do things like setting our own custom pivots and setting our own custom scaling rules and stuff like that, but we're not going to do that in this video because oftentimes you can solve something with the preset set here for you. For example, this text should always be in the middle aligned to this object here, to the little squirrel image. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this. And now that doesn't look right, right? It set it all the way to the left side of our parent object, which is this image, which would be, you know, over here. So I'm actually going to rewind and set it to our right. Also doesn't look right. It took our right side and went ahead and pivot and made our pivot equal, you know, go there. So I'm going to set it back to the left and actually give it an offset simply by moving it over. And let's shrink it down a bit, and we'll have to redo that just a tiny bit, or change our position Y to 0. And there we go. That looks pretty good in my opinion. So that's how you do your anchors and stuff like that. Generally, obviously, this UI doesn't look good on the screen, but you will go through a lot of iterations on your UI as you build stuff. The very final thing that I'm going to stress is if your buttons or UI elements for some reason don't work, you have to ensure that you have an event system in your hierarchy. This gets made as soon as you make a canvas, but is vital if you delete this. Let's go ahead and do that. Your buttons don't do anything, or any of your other interactable UI elements. You need to have an event system in there, or the buttons and whatnot don't receive any input events. And that's it for this video. It should be, if you have any questions on UI in general or anything at all, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to me over Discord.